Those do tend to be very comorbid, along with ADD.
Amen.
Yeah. Me, although I was diagnosed very young, I didn't feel like I got much from it other than like meds when I was in high school until I started researching into it myself.
Hello, everyone. Mr. Autism here with our next new guest, and this is Brooklyn.
Hello.
Brooklyn has been kind enough to join us today, and first I want to let you all know that Brooklyn is actually the sibling of one of the more recent interviewees. His name is Paul.
Two.
Two, you say?
Yeah, interviewee 2. That was the video. Interview 2.
Ah, she's right. That was the second interview. Now, I'm just curious, how did Paul tell you about this?
He just like said in the group chat like, oh, by the way, my friend's like interviewing people on the autism spectrum, and I'm like, well, that's all of us. Might as well go.
And in all curiosity, what was your expectation coming into this interview?
Oh, well, I watched all the videos first, so I figured like, hey, I'll come in, I'll sit down, and we'll ask some questions. So, pretty much exactly this.
Very good. Now, I will definitely let you ask me some questions because I think that'll be interesting, but I wanted to ask you some questions. First, when did you first find out that you were on the spectrum?
I was really young. I'd say I'm not great at remembering ages in my memories, but I'd say like around 8-ish, maybe a little younger, probably a little younger. And my brother, my first youngest brother, got diagnosed with autism. And then my second youngest brother, which is Paul, got diagnosed with autism. And the doctor's all like, hey, it runs in family. Bring in your oldest daughter to get her tested. And, well, I've got autism. How about that?
Yeah, how about that? It runs in my family, too. I got several cousins who are on the spectrum just like me. Mm-hmm. But just out of curiosity, did anything change after your diagnosis?
Not immediately afterwards, but in the next year at school, there was a bullying incident. I had like rocks, tiny little pebbles thrown at my head, and then chess pieces. Those hurt. And so my mom was like, all right, we have got to get you out of this school. And I got moved to Spectrum Academy. Yeah, I actually skipped 5th grade because they only had a spot open to me in 6th grade because I was moved in the middle of the year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I actually used to work for Spectrum Academy down in Pleasant Grove. Which Spectrum Academy did you go to?
I think it was the one in Pleasant Grove. I know it was near like Foxborough Road because that was the one sign I'd see every time we were going down there. Right. But, you know, I stopped going there after the end of middle school. I don't think they had built the I think they only had 2 schools when I started going there, and they built like the 3rd school and split it up between elementary, middle school, high school, like while I was there. So, it seems like quite a while ago.
It definitely does. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am 23.
Really?
Well, I'll be 23.
Dude, you look young.
Well, okay, I guess I do then.
That was meant to be a compliment.
Yeah, but like, you know, you get too much younger than 23 and they're all like, why are you driving a car? Go back to middle school. But thank you.
You're welcome. So, I wanted to give this time for you to ask me a question or two.
Mm-hmm. How old are you?
I'm 33.
Nice. You mentioned, I think, having kids in like an earlier interview. Has he gotten like diagnosed?
We're waiting to get him diagnosed because he's almost 2, so we feel like he's too young.
Yeah.
And we're currently getting him some early intervention stuff. Mm-hmm. But again, he's way too young to tell if he's on the spectrum. So we're going to wait till he's around 3 or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things we're playing by ear.
Do you feel that like a formal diagnosis has like, when did you get diagnosed, and do you feel a formal diagnosis has helped you?
I was first diagnosed when I was, I think, 7. Mm-hmm. And then I was re-diagnosed at 23. Mm-hmm. And the re-diagnosis was much more helpful because along with the autism, I was also diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Mm-hmm. And then much later in life, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. So the autism diagnosis did help because it let me understand some things about myself. Mm-hmm. But the anxiety and depression disorders were way more helpful because those are way more invasive in my life than the autism is.
Those do tend to be very comorbid, along with ADD.
Amen.
Yeah. Me, although I was diagnosed very young, I didn't feel like I got much from it other than like meds when I was in high school until I started researching into it myself.
What did you find in your research?
I found out about executive dysfunction um, from a blogger that I was following actually, who had ADD. And executive dysfunction, I feel, is like the main symptom that I have to deal with, as well as like the main problem. Which, in that, do you know about executive dysfunction?
I don't. Please share.
All right, so there's this notion that people have these executive functions and they're like in charge of being in charge. I think a little like a board of executives sort of thing. So there's when you do something, planning to do it, starting to do the thing is all part of your executive functions. They're like what lets you make a plan on like, here is how I am going to do this thing. They're what lets you go, all right, I'm going to get started on this thing. They're what lets you say like, oh, it's going to be 30 minutes to get this thing done, and also help generally keep track of time. Time blindness is an executive dysfunction in and of itself, which I feel is a pretty common symptom in autism.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Now, aside from the learning about the executive functions and how that applies to you, what is one thing from your recent research into autism has been very helpful for you?
It's mostly been the executive dysfunctions and the way of working around them, honestly. That's been like the main thing. I'm just gonna keep going on this one topic. Because executive dysfunctions, you can't power through them. I spent like my entire childhood being all like, right, today I got nothing done, but tomorrow I will rise like a phoenix from the ashes and I will suddenly and magically be a productive person and I'll get my whole goal done. And it never worked that way, and I just ended up being all like, man, this feels awful, and just spiraling down. And now that I found about executive dysfunctions, I'm like, all right, I guess I'm not getting anything done today. I can't work through this. I cannot power through this. I'm going to take a break and approach it in a different way. So I suppose the most useful thing, other than finding out executive dysfunctions, was finding out how to deal with them.
So how do you deal with them?
The number one thing is to stop powering through them. You are just going to exhaust yourself, and then you are going to feel awful at the end. And sometimes that, like, itself is enough. If I'm like, okay, I'm not getting anything done today, and I throw all my plans out, then I'm like, okay, I actually have enough energy to get 2 out of the 3 tasks that I was planning to do done, now that I'm not stressing about trying to handle the whole day's list of things. And the other thing is to just get really creative. You need to work around executive dysfunctions. You cannot blaze through it. If you don't feel like you can do the dishes, then my brother, in between me and Paul, he's gotten dishes gloves because he can't handle the texture of the dishes. And instead of powering through it and being like, now you have to touch the slimy, gross dishes, he got gloves. And that's been helping a lot. And they've helped me too whenever he lets me borrow them. And mostly to just be kind with myself, I suppose.
That's very interesting, because I find a struggle for me to be kind with myself, and I'm genuinely wanting to ask, what are one or two specific examples of you being kind to yourself?
Forgiving myself whenever I have to like let a day go down in flames. I try not to beat myself or verbally berate myself ever again, because I've been doing that for years now and it has never once worked. So even when I do mess up, I'm not going to be mean to myself over it, because if it had worked, it would have worked by now. Instead, I just take this as information and be like, okay, something is falling apart. This is my body telling me that it can't go on like this anymore. Now it's time to be creative and find another way of doing it. Do it at a different hour, do it in a different way, promise myself like a treat to get there. Although a lot of the time, whenever I like promise myself a treat to go there and I get there, I'm like, I don't even need a treat. For me, my executive dysfunction is mostly trouble in getting started with tasks. So I promise myself all manner of treats at the end of a task to get myself started. And then once I'm getting started, I'm all like, man, I don't even need a treat. But it's important to work with yourself and not against yourself. And that's part of being nice to yourself, trusting that you're not doing this thing because your body hates you or something. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. That was very insightful, and I really appreciate it. And this is the end of the interview, and I thank you so much for your time. And there's one last thing I wanted to ask you, but this is very unserious and fun. Brooklyn, what is your favorite word?
Ooh. Wasps. Petiole. That's the name for like a wasp waste. And it's also like you use the word petiole for like a lot of other things that are wasp waste. Like, you know, when you have a beehive and it's got the little thin thing attached to the branch, that's also called petiole. So it's for wasp weights, it's for the wasp's nest top thing. And you'll see it once you like look up the word petiole, you'll see it showing up in all these sort of random places. So wasp wasted has its own word for it, petiole.
I like that.
I like wasps.
And I like that too. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.